So I don't think it's a secret anymore that I really love zombies. Zombies in movie, without a doubt, dude. You always gotta watch something like Dawn of the Dead, or even Shaun of the Dead for that matter. Zombies in TV shows? Hell yeah, shows like early seasons of The Walking Dead are pretty good. You know, there's Z Nation. There's not a lot of good zombie shows. Hell, dude, if a zombie walked up to me and started gnawing on my flesh, I would gladly accept it, because who would not want to be a fucking badass rotting corpse? But the media I absolutely love zombies to be in is, of course, video games. Like, I just love how developers handle zombies in any video game whatsoever. Some games might include the slow and stupid zombie that really isn't a threat by itself, but becomes extremely dangerous when in groups, or even when a hostile person is nearby. Others might include a fast-paced shoot-'em-up, which shows maybe some special infected that would tear you to shreds faster than you can say, they're tearing me to shreds. However, one of these zombie games that shares both a slower paced zombie and a fast paced special infected that I just absolutely adore is the game Dead Island. Released in September of 2011 by the publisher team Deep Silver, Dead Island took the gaming industry by storm, with it surpassing over 5 million sales 2 years after launch. The game is about a group of 4 survivors being immune to whatever virus is making people become undead with a simple bite, with your goal being in the beginning of the game to help other survivors not die a painful death on a tropical resort island called Benoit. However, the deeper you go into the island, you will start to fight harder zombies, more unique special infected, and even some other humans. So to counteract the dangers of, well, everything, you have to craft new weapons, repair them, make sure you upgrade them as well, and become an all-around tank. And after you and the other survivors become well off, you have to turn your goal into finding out what exactly happened to cause the virus and how to create a cure for this rider white guy who says he can help you get off the island. But we all know he's just the bad guy of the game. On paper, the game sounds awfully mid if I'm being honest. A generic story with pretty generic zombies, but once you get to play the actual game, you'll see some beautiful environments that still look good to this day. You'll feel the fluid movements of your character and the well-off fighting in this game, and even though the story is in fact mid, don't get me wrong, there could have been a much better storyline. Like as an example, in Act 2, while you're looking for some food for Cinemoy's group, you get told about a little girl who you never get to see, hear, or even know about, joining Cinemoy's group just to die off later in like 10 minutes. The gameplay is very obviously the driving factor of Dead Island, and because of that alone, I would genuinely sit down and play the game over and over and over again if I wanted to. Development team Techland did such an amazing job making Dead Island, so much so that Deep Silver would partner with them once again to create the direct sequel Dead Island Riptide, and it's alright, I guess. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike Dead Island Riptide, but the entire game takes place solely in the jungle of a neighboring island, which by the way, the jungle setting was always a hit or miss for a lot of people, it being a miss for me, and the game just felt rushed. Like, the story was just not long enough, and although the gameplay is alright, it doesn't feel like a step up from its predecessor that came out 2 years prior. But why am I talking about games that are over a decade old at this point? Has the Tired Cast channel really run out of topics that he's now resorting to talking about classic horror games? Well, as most of you may know, in February of 2023, Dead Island 2 will finally be released to the public, after 8 years of it being an utter development hell with no regular updates about the title. That by itself is extremely shady for any company to do, but when you actually look into the reason of why the game has taken even longer, it's a damn miracle that the game is even coming out at this point. So with that, I really want to take a couple minutes to show you what the hell has been taking so long with Dead Island 2, and why you should at the very least be skeptical of its launch. So with that said, sit back, relax, and watch as your favorite white guy fucking dies while simply running. So remember how I said not even a minute ago that Dead Island Riptide has become this very mixed game upon release? Well, that's where we start with the timeline of problems regarding Dead Island and even Deep Silver. Deep Silver is the sole owner of the Dead Island IP, so of course they get to have the final say on their own franchise. In Dead Island 1, this was sort of a problem between Techland and Deep Silver, as creative disputes is a very common thing to happen in the development industry between two companies, but at that point it hasn't become anything too dire just yet. But Dead Island Riptide changed all of that and began the souring partnership between the two companies. In an interview by I don't know how to say his last name, it's Binkowski, that's very easy to pronounce, but what the fuck is his first name? That's not even a bit. Please someone in the comments tell me how to say his first name. But Binkowski goes on to explain how tensions just continued to rise as Techland had troubles with creative ideas and very short deadlines.
Right from the start, the IP was theirs. It was Techland's game, Techland's idea, but it wasn't a strong enough entity as a developer to argue. At that point, we weren't really in a position to negotiate, so that was the best deal we could get. It's like playing poker. You have to make a decision with the information you have now. If you play the game thinking something might happen, you're going to lose the game. At that point, that was the best decision we could do. They had a lot of ideas about how they wanted to run the franchise. Even with Dead Island, there were a lot of moments where we would disagree on the creative vision of the project, so this might have been one of the factors.
Now, it wasn't really a dramatic leap between the two companies. Hell, Binkowski goes on to say that there was no real bad blood between the two companies, but it was very obvious that Deep Silver at first took advantage over the creative issues with Techland, as when first starting out, Techland was a simple nobody. Before Dead Island, nobody's even heard of the company, but it was very obvious that Deep Silver at first took advantage over the creative issues with Techland, as when first starting out, Techland was a sheer nobody. Before Dead Island, nobody's even heard of the company, so Techland really didn't have anyone else to turn to when starting out. But now that Techland became a somebody, they were able to branch out to create games that would help them out tenfold, as known as one of the greatest zombie games of all time, Dying Light. So after Dead Island Riptide, and after just going a little bit into the development of Dead Island 2, Techland said enough was enough with the creative disputes and left their partnership with Deep Silver. So that's that. Techland is not making Dead Island 2. The company that put Dead Island on the map with their almost perfect initial gameplay that made so many people fall in love with the game is now gone. Of course, Dead Island 2 would be negatively affected by this, as there was just no way that any other development team could overshadow the titans of zombie horror, and that was very much the case, as the next development team that took on the title was fucking Jaeger Development. Jaeger, before Dead Island 2, created games that were never really popular. I'm talking about games like Spec Ops 2 and the very, very creative game title, Jaeger. What? That's like me releasing a video game review on my channel and I just name it Cast. That's the amount of creativity that this development team had. So with that, it became very obvious very quickly that Dead Island 2 was a new genre for Jaeger to create. They've never made a zombie game beforehand, and it very much showed as the then San Francisco-based game demo was released around 2015, and it just looked like an oversaturated mess of an arcade shoot-'em-up. This just felt like Dead Rising 4, but with a blinding saturation and a first-person environment. Jaeger did not last long being in the development team, as in the same year of 2015, they dropped the partnership due to creative differences and soon shut down a couple years later due to them being in copious amounts of debt. Oh, and by the way, creative differences is a very common pattern that you'll see between Deep Silver and any development team. But after Jaeger Development, the next team that would pick up the franchise was Sumo Digital, the company that publishers go to when they have a game that nobody else wants to develop. The 1980 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, developed by Sumo Digital, the Sonic racing game that nobody remembers, Sumo Digital, all the racing games and even the tennis games you could ever imagine and then some, even Sonic Tennis. Guess what? That was made by none other than Sumo Digital. Just like Jaeger, Sumo has never done anything with the zombie genre, let alone do anything with a first-person open-world zombie genre. Why would you want a development team to create a AAA title that is very widely known if they've never had the experience with that type of game ever? Was there just nobody else that wanted to take on the title because of Deep Silver's creative disputes, or because the game was already considered to be in development hell? Like, come on, dude. Sumo has worked on this game from the ground up for a little bit less than 3 years while having absolutely no public updates about the game. And guess what? Sumo Digital soon gets released by Deep Silver. Go fucking figure. From the time that Dead Island 2 was in the works up to around 2018-2019, the game has been ditched by 3 separate development companies. I tried to do any research about a game that has a similar amount of drops, but I shit you not, I could not find any other game that went through this. The only other game that was passed around like a hot potato for years was Duke Nukem Forever. Yeah, that's right, we are now at the point where we have to compare Dead Island 2 to one of the objectively worst games that ever were released. And even then, Duke Nukem Forever hasn't been passed around like this. Although Duke Nukem developers did have to create the game from the ground up multiple times, Dead Island did it more times in a shorter time frame. That's terrifying for any game. There's so many massively popular games that took forever due to inside problems, and the end result was just being a mess that everyone hated. Cyberpunk 2077 took forever in the development scene, and their launch caused the game to be killed off in the matter of hours. Star Citizen is another game that took over a decade to create, and the end result became this pay-to-win mess. And I know that there can be outliers of developers taking forever to make a game, but have the game launch and become universally loved loved, like Cuphead for example, but the majority of games that go through development hell never turn out to be good. So what makes Dead Island 2 any different? But now we have reached to the present day where the new development team behind Dead Island is none other than Deep Silver Dam Buster. After the acquisition of Deep Silver and Dam Buster in the mid-2010s, Dam Buster has created and released 2 games, that being Homefront: The Revolution and Chorus. I don't know much about these games, I've never even played them, let alone even know that they have existed, but once again, just like the last 2 teams, this is something that Dam Buster has not explored. Sure, they've done FPS games before their acquisition, and they're very obviously the most capable team of the bunch considering that they have most experience in that genre with little that they have, and that the creative disputes isn't all that much of a problem since the publishers full-on own the development team. But wow, Dead Island went from being an enormous game with Techland at the helm to something that's been uncertain for close to a decade with teams juggling the game around. And that's where my concern with the game lies. I do know that the gameplay review was released a few days ago, and everything about the game looks pretty decent from what was shown, but I can't lie and say that I'm not worried about how the game was handled and how it will end up because of it. I am excited for this game, a Dead Island game on the modern day console that isn't a shitty remaster or a shitty arcade shoot 'em up. Fuck yeah, dude. I always wanted to see the beauty of this game in 4K, but I just don't know how this will end up, and I think even just pre-ordering the game is not a good idea for that sense. But you know, if I'm wrong, I am wrong. In fact, I really want to be proven wrong. And you know, I really do want to make a review of this game in the future where I just clown on what I'm saying right now and full on praise the game. But just like everyone else, I just don't know for certain how this game will end up. But with that said, I'm gonna end this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys liked this video, maybe hit that like button and subscribe. I know this was something different than a traditional horror game review on my channel, but this is something that I really wanted to talk about for a hot minute. So if you guys like this ramble, please let me know and I would continue forward with it. But anyways, I will see you all in a later video. Bye for now.